All right, everybody, welcome back to Anatomy and Physiology video series. This is going to be lesson 2 for the digestive system, and picking up where we left off, we talked about the 5 different processes that food is prepared for use by the cells. We went through those systems and gave a brief overview. So today we're going to pick up where we left off on slide 13, and we'll go ahead and get that started. All right, so we have the study of gastroenterology. If you are going to go into this field and specialize into this field, you would be referred to as a gastroenterologist. And this is the medical specialty that deals with the structure, function, diagnosis, and treatment of diseases of the stomach and intestines. So, some of you may be familiar with the term proctology or a proctologist. That is someone who solely deals with the colon and large intestine. A gastroenterologist would be the person you would go to see if you have issues with your stomach, say if you have ulcers or if you have acid reflux, also known as heartburn. Again, heartburn is technically it's not your heart that burns, it's your esophagus, but we'll get more into that later. So anyway, if you have any of those issues, you would go see a gastroenterologist, and if that is a field you are interested in, then you would study the specific field of gastroenterology. All right, so again, these are the organs of digestion that are usually divided into 2 main groups. So here's where we're going to start talking about the additional structures that we will see. So the 2 main groups are going to be what is referred to as the gastrointestinal tract, or sometimes called the GI tract for short. In some resources, you will see this referred to as the alimentary canal. And basically, this is the pathway. These are the organs that make the pathway that food will go through. So these are all hollow organs. These are all areas that food will pass through on its way through your digestive system. If there is an organ that aids in digestion but never contains any food, then they are considered accessory structures. So that's the difference. Okay. So basically, if any of these organs, so from here we have the mouth, so the GI tract is where the tubes that food will pass through. So we have mouth, we have the pharynx, we have the esophagus, goes into the stomach. From there, it will pass to the small intestine, and it will bebop around here through 20 some feet worth of small intestine, and will make its way down and out right here into the large intestine, and then it will head on out and over and down and out the body. All right, that is the GI tract. That is going to be your alimentary canal. The organs that aid in digestion, such as the liver, the gallbladder, the pancreas, your teeth, your tongue, those are all going to be accessory structures. Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about them. So the GI tract is a continuous tube running through the ventral body cavity from the mouth to the anus. Organs composing the GI tract include, as we just mentioned, the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestines, and the large intestines. That is going to be the organs that make up the GI tract. So, again, by definition, the GI tract contains the food from the time it is eaten until it is digested and prepared for elimination. So, again, if it's a hollow tube that food passes through, that is going to be your GI tract or alimentary canal. The accessory structures, some of the accessory structures would include your liver, this big guy right here, the liver, the gallbladder, and we'll talk more about the gallbladder in one of the next lessons. So the gallbladder is the storage organ for bile that is produced by the liver. So the liver makes bile, the gallbladder stores it. And then we have the pancreas, and the pancreas is tucked in here and is attached to the very beginning part of your small intestine, and it has a very particular job. Typically, this is when I talk about the pancreas song. Maybe I'll put a link to that and let you experience the wonderfulness that is the pancreas song. All right, so if we're going to look at the most of the organs that comprise or are used in your digestive system here, let's take a look at the ones that are considered a component of your GI tract. So the esophagus, does food go through the esophagus? Yes. So the esophagus is one of the GI tract. Does food go through the liver? No. Does it go through the gallbladder? No. Does food go through the stomach? Yes. So this is a member of the GI tract. Pancreas, no. Colon, yes, it's part of the large intestine. So that is part of your GI tract. Small intestine will contain food. So that is part. The appendix, nope. Food does not go into the appendix. The appendix is a vestigial structure, and we'll talk more about that later. And then, of course, the rectum. The rectum is the last part of your colon or small intestine. So the circled terms are all part of the GI tract, and the non-circled structures or organs there are part of what are considered accessory structures to digestion. All right, let's talk about the protective covering, the lining of these organs, what are considered your visceral mass. The lining is called the peritoneum. It is the largest serous membrane of the body, and it is divided into two sections. You have the parietal peritoneum that lines the wall of the abdominal cavity. So that is right here, and you can see that this is the stuff that's going to line the outside of this whole cavity right here on both on the anterior and posterior portions. So all of this is all parietal peritoneum. Now, that lining will extend and will also cover the organs. We see it here, the blue line here, all of the lining around the intestine, all that blue that goes around. So this is a lateral view. So these are the intestine here has been severed, and it would almost be the view that we're looking down inside that open tube. So all this blue line is the peritoneum. So the visceral peritoneum is the protective covering that surrounds the organs and helps protect them and keep them nice and safe. So here is again, we'll look at the two different kinds. We have the parietal peritoneum and we have the visceral peritoneum. Remember, when we hear the word visceral, we think of visceral mass, and that is all of these organs here that are kept inside this body cavity. Okay? So the space that is in between the lining of the body cavity, the parietal peritoneum, and the lining of the organs, the visceral peritoneum, we call that the peritoneal cavity. And that is an open area between the inside of the body wall and the lining of the organs. So the potential space between the parietal and visceral portions of the peritoneum is called the peritoneal cavity and contains serous fluid. So the fluid that is secreted by this membrane that keeps your organs nice and wet and lubricated so that they can slide easily and as your body moves. It keeps a pretty friction-free environment inside there. So as those organs move and as your body moves, those organs can rub up against each other and not cause any damage due to friction. The peritoneum contains large folds that weave between the viscera, or your massive organs, functioning to support organs and contain blood, lymphatic vessels, and nerves of the abdominal organ. So if we ever make it back and we dissect the cats, one of the organs on your cat dissection is called the mesentery. And the mesentery would be all of this membrane that holds all of these intestines together. So here's my Hollywood movie debunk. All right. So I'm sure we've seen movies, and I've even had this discussion for you Grey's Anatomy fans, um, where someone has had their abdominal wall cut open and all of their organs spill out and land, on their feet. It's a great special effect, but it doesn't happen that way. Your organs, your intestines are all held in place here by this membrane, this mesentery and this peritoneum keeps them in place. So even if I know, you guys think a lot of you ladies think that Grey's Anatomy is the most anatomically accurate show that you can watch. But there are problems, with this soap opera that's focused around a hospital. So we have, if you were to cut this abdominal wall, these organs may sag and maybe poke out of that opening, but they're certainly not going to fall out of the body and land on your feet. That's just Hollywood magic. Okay, so this membrane holds it in place. And I have had this discussion, and a young lady said, "No, I saw it on Grey's Anatomy." Well, Grey's Anatomy was wrong. All right, so that again, that is your peritoneum, and you have the visceral, which lines the organ, and the parietal peritoneum that lines the body wall, and the space in between is called the peritoneal cavity. Extensions of the peritoneum include the mesentery, which I just talked about, the mesocolon, that's what's going to be around the colon, your large intestine, which is right there, the falciform ligament, that's up here holding the liver in place, the lesser omentum, which is going to make a protective covering in front here, and the greater omentum. And when we, hopefully when we get back and we do our cat dissection where we cut open and look at the organs of our cat, the first thing you're going to find when you cut that abdominal wall open is going to be this protective membrane called the greater omentum. And many of you will say, "Oh my gosh, are those the intestines?" And I will remind you of that protective covering that surrounds, and it's called the greater omentum. Now, that's something that when we get there, we'll end up removing out of the cat and getting rid of it, but that's what that is. That'll be the first thing you'll see when you cut that cat open. Okay, so that is going to conclude lesson 2. So let's jump out of here. Okay, go back to the camera. All right, so that's going to conclude lesson 2. So go ahead and, as we did at the end of lesson 1, go to Schoology, find your exit slip for this lesson, and answer the questions that will coincide with today's lecture material. If you have any questions, let me know, and hopefully by this time I'll have my office hours up and we'll be able to go in and actually speak to each other online. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.